Hey friend, do you feel like you lack creativity on the drums? Like you just regurgitate the same 3 or 4 ideas over and over again and you're just bored with everything that you play? Are you wondering if you just don't have the natural ability to craft unique parts like you hear your favorite drummers doing effortlessly? Well, if that's you, if that's what's going through your head, you were in the right place today. Here's something really cool and hopefully freeing for you. Most drummers assume that learning to improvise means having to figure out how to pull great ideas out of thin air. But the truth is, you don't have to be able to do that. All that you really need is a step-by-step, predictable results framework that you can just follow that will have you improvising automatically. And that's what we're getting into today. Today you'll learn a 5-step framework for creating unique musical rhythms on the kit, which you can then take to create syncopated kick drum patterns as well as impactful melodic fills. And best of all, this is a fun system that works even if you're a totally new beginner. Let's transform your playing to a place where you can think of great rhythmic ideas on the fly, having tons of fun on your instrument as you create. You can do this. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out today. I help self-taught beginner drummers know what to practice so that you can nail songs and be the drummer other people want to play with and want to have in their band. And hey, while you're here, I've got a free gift for you in the description. I want to help you solve your weak hand and build fast fluid chops around the drum set, even if you're constrained to quiet pad practice. If you're having to practice on a pad on the go, or it's just more convenient, you find you practice more when you're on your pad. If you're having to spend a lot of time on a practice pad, then this is going to help you out a whole bunch, because the danger with pad practice is that you work on a bunch of things that don't translate to the full kit. You get to where you're feeling good on the pad, but then you get on the drum set and you're like, I feel like I haven't done anything. I've been there, I know how you feel. And so what I've done here in this simple PDF e-guide is I've boiled down the most helpful pad exercises that actually do carry over to the full drum set, so that in this simple 30-minute practice routine, you can actually get a lot of productive drum set practice done just on the pad. I lived in an apartment for 2.5 years as a working, gigging drummer, and these are the things I would play through in the morning before going to a rehearsal, before going to a gig. And I found that I could then show up at the rehearsal or the gig on the full kit and actually feel fresh, feel like I had been playing the drums that day. So my hope is it'll do the same for you. Be sure to grab it, free PDF guide for you in the description. Let's dive into today's lesson. So this is super simple, actionable. We're going through 5 steps that you can go through along with me as you're watching, even if you're a total beginner. First though, something that I've got to say and kind of plant in your head, and I think I want this marinating, resonating in your mind as we go through all of today's lesson, and it's this. You need to be thinking in rhythms, and you need to be thinking about drums, music, grooves, fills, favorite songs, whatever, all the time, even when you're away from the drum set. If the only time you think about drumming or music or songs is when you're at the drum set, that's not enough time. You can get a lot done practicing 30 minutes a day, ideally, an hour and a half. But even if you just have 30 minutes a day to physically practice, that's great. But in order for that to really work, and in order for you to maximize that, you've also got to be thinking musically, thinking about the drums, playing beats in your head, having favorite songs stuck in your head, playing through fills in your head. You got to have all that stuff going on too, because that ends up really growing you automatically in a way, even when you're not playing the kit. Here's an example. So as a kid, I would tabletop drum all the time. I was playing with silverware on my plate. I was playing with a pencil. I was homeschooled, and me and my sister, we would be doing our school. Like, this was when she was in middle school, I was in high school, and we would be doing our school at the same table, like next to each other growing up. And so I would start playing with my pencil, and while I'm like doing my science homework, and she would start tapping, and we would be like jamming at the tabletop. The great thing about homeschooling, right? And so we had a lot of fun. And at the dinner table, I'm like tapping my feet and I'm playing all the time, like playing all these beats. And I honestly credit that to helping me learn to improvise early on. So I want you doing the same. Besides these physical drum set exercises we're doing today, I want you tabletop drumming, tapping the pencil, tapping whatever. When you're sitting at a red light, tapping the steering wheel, I want you thinking in rhythms. Be thinking about rhythms, melodic ideas, just making yourself just make stuff up. No rules, just making stuff up, just jamming on your own when you're away from the kit. It will go a long way, and I think it'll play a huge role in helping you learn to improvise. But hey, let's get into some structure, some step-by-step stuff that is obviously going to help you out a bunch here. So here's what we want to do. Grab your stick, sit down at your kit. Step number 1, play alternating singles, literally just like this. That's all we're going to do to start off. That's why I say, even if you're a total beginner, you can do this. If you can play right, left, right, left, right, left, and do it somewhat evenly, then you're off to a great start. What we're doing is this whole exercise that's based off of something that I learned that my first drum set teacher taught me. And what we did was we took rhythms from Ted Reed's Syncopation. You may be familiar with that book. It's one of those classic, 30s, 40s legendary drum methods, and it's got all these rhythms in it. What we would do is we would take a rhythm and we would play that rhythm with the accents while playing alternating singles on the snare. And so what I want to do today is basically bridge the gap from reading a rhythm and playing it with the accents, and kind of give you some steps for getting there and ways to get going with this, even if you're brand new, even if you're not reading rhythms yet. Everything we're doing today, you don't have to read music to do it. And so it makes this a little bit more bite-sized. But that's kind of what inspired this, the whole concept that you can create rhythms and melodies by accenting your singles. So that's why step 1 is just... And then step 2, practice making one hand louder than the other. So just spend some time, practicing playing loudly with the right hand, soft with the left, and then vice versa. And this will require a little bit of control. I told you, a total beginner can do this. What you might find is that technically speaking, you have to practice going from loud to soft quickly, which is something that's kind of easy to skim over here. But something that you want to be aware of when you're playing softly, you want to have a nice firm hold on the stick, because we're not, it's not this super loose motion when we're playing softly. It's a little more firm and from the wrist. Versus when you play loud, you can open up your hand a little bit, but then you'll need to close it back down to then stop that rebound to get soft again. So if we were to play this, see how I choked out that rebound? Brought the stick down to here so then I could play the quiet note. That's the technique worth mentioning and worth practicing as you work to get this cleaner. Kind of sounds like the string synthy thing, the lead line in Viva La Vida by Coldplay, right? Bum, 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 bum. I'm not even going to try to hum it right. But if you know that song, you know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of cool how you start playing beats here and then off beats here, and it's like, hey, we suddenly have the melody of a pop song from a few years ago. And so that's kind of neat. And this is really simple, and you're not really having to think about too much, right? So notice how right hand, anytime you accent the right hand, you're playing down beats, basically. Like you're playing 1 and 2 and. Anytime you accent the left hand, you're playing up beats. So the opposite of down beats, up beats. We could call them off beats, up beats, the E's and the U's. So if we're counting 1 and 2 and, as soon as we start accenting the left hand, we're going 1, E and E, which is what creates syncopation. And syncopation is what creates interesting melodies. We tend to, when we talk about syncopation, we tend to assume that that means playing something really busy and like going. All of that, sure, that's syncopation. But what's also syncopation is this. Simple things like that. Thinking in simple rhythms involves creating little bits of syncopation, but with space. When you have syncopation mixed with space, you have interesting, compelling, impactful melodies. And we'll talk about that a little more as we kind of think about applying this more into fills. But you get the idea. It's really cool what you can do with this. And so syncopation just means adding these upbeats, which is what our left hand is playing when we're doing these alternating singles. Because if all we ever played was... That's a rhythm. There's a rhythm there. But as soon as we add in that left hand, it gets really interesting. Pretty cool what starts happening, and you don't even have to think too much about it. And so hopefully you're automatically starting to hear rhythms happening here. Step 3 is kind of what we were already touching on there, just more specifically what we want to do here is switch your dynamics more often so that the loud hand is quickly changing. that's when you hear the interesting rhythm. So let's say starting off, we weren't switching often. So we kind of had the Viva La Vida rhythm. Or maybe it was even less frequent than that. Maybe we were going. So maybe that was where you started. But now we want to start shifting more often and say like, okay, let's get a little more intentional about this so it's less random. Let's accent the right hand for half a bar, so 2 beats. Then accent the left hand for another 2 beats. So that would be like going 1 and 2 and 3, E, 1 and 2 and E, E. I'm going to play the beats with my left foot. So if you're counting along, 1 and 2 and 3, E and up, E and 1 and 2 and 3, E and up, E and up. You don't have to add the feet. I was just showing you where 1 and 3 were and where each beat was. So you get the idea. Practice being intentional there. Then let's accent the right hand for just a beat, and then the left hand for just a beat. That means now we've got 1 and 2, E and 3 and E, 4 and E, and so on. So we're switching more often. Does that rhythm sound familiar? So if you let that play in your head a little bit, bum, 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 bum. It's the Flintstones theme song, right? Bum, 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 bum. So what's cool about this is hopefully showing you how simple a lot of these iconic rhythms are in songs. You might start, like you literally might start thinking of songs as you're playing this, which is what I want you to do. Because remember, we're trying to learn to think in rhythms and learn to think in melodies. Melodies and rhythms are essentially the same thing on the drums for us. Yes, this is a melodic instrument. If we tune our drums intentionally, we do have specific notes and pitches coming from our toms and from our snare. But generally speaking, when we talk about melodies on the drums, we're just talking about rhythms. So if you can think in melodies and think in rhythms and start playing these on the drum set, get them playing in your head like the Flintstones, like Viva La Vida, then hey, that much better. You're not having to sit here and think about, okay, let me accent 1 and 2, E and 3. No, you just think Flintstones. And so have fun doing that. I want you to be able to play that melody in your head. Or if that melody isn't playing in your head, that's okay. Keep doing that and then keep experimenting with it and see what you start coming up with. Because what we want to do for step 4 is allow some space going back to soft, ghosted right, left singles with no accents. So remember a minute ago we said syncopation plus space equals melody. Because if there's no syncopation, that means the rhythm isn't interesting. There's nothing for our ear to grab onto. And if there's no space, then we end up with things like... I mean, that was fine as a fill, and we could actually hear some rhythm coming from the toms. But okay, let's say if we just played this fill. Nothing wrong with that. That might be the right thing in a song, but there was no rhythm or melody in that because all it was notes, no space, no syncopation. So as soon as we start adding space, space can create syncopation. When we have syncopation and we intentionally add space, we get really cool melody. So what we want to do here in step 4 is play some rhythms here. So maybe the Viva La Vida thing, the Flintstones thing, whatever's coming to mind here. Accent one hand, then accent the other. Then as soon as you feel like a phrase has completed, then quiet down again. So give it a rest, kind of like this. Like that. So it's like you finish it, okay, quiet, because it feels like a phrase just finished. And so then we get quiet again, we're adding some space. So it kind of feels like we just said something, we made a statement. You hear this all the time in jazz. If you listen to jazz, go listen to, Miles Davis, Kinda Blue, Art Blakey, Moanin', any of those records, and you'll hear a trumpet player or a sax player play a little lick, and then they pause. It's like they've said something. Maybe there's a call and response. A trumpet player says something, the sax says something. Or maybe it's just one person soloing, but either way, they're putting space in their solos. You don't hear, in jazz, you don't hear a solo that's a trumpet solo that's the equivalent of... I know it's kind of an exaggeration, but you're not going to just hear a million notes that never stop. That's exhausting to the ear. If you just sit here and you play... There's just nothing interesting about that. Nobody enjoys listening to that. I don't enjoy listening to that. I don't enjoy playing that because there's nothing interesting. But as soon as you do things like when we start thinking in rhythms, adding space, adding syncopation, it gets way more interesting. And so what you can do is practice, okay, back to the Viva La Vida thing. And go to the really soft ghost notes at the end. So you make a statement, get soft, take a break, make another statement. So as we start experimenting with this, it might be something like, that was a little bit of a longer one. So experiment with that, where you're trying to say something interesting here with how you're accenting, and then get soft again so that it's the end of a phrase, the end of a statement. There's a break in the action. That way it feels like a melodic phrase, right? And now step 5, let's make it even more fun. We've kind of alluded to this and foreshadowed to this. Let's move the accents to the toms. So in the case of the Viva La Vida thing, it might be, I thought of the Viva La Vida thing on the fly, so I don't remember exactly how that melody goes. I think it's bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum 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 ba 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 ba. So really it would be, actually what we could do, it gets a little weird trying to cross the left hand down here. What's cool though is as you do this, so right hand can go to the floor tom, left hand can go to the rack, but also right hand could go to the rack. So that could make it more interesting because, you know, both hands can go to the rack, maybe just right hand down here. You could do that. You can move back and forth a little bit. What about the Flintstones rhythm? No rules. You could also throw in an accent on the snare too and play a rim shot. It starts to get really interesting when you realize, okay, right hand could go to either tom, left hand could go to rack tom, or it could stay on the snare. So much you can do, and then just come back to right here. Remember, this is your home base. If anything gets crazy, if anything goes wrong, let's say it just gets messy, you don't know what you're doing, just come right back to the snare right here, back to your ghost notes, your home base, you're safe here, and then you can start fresh, start all over again. There's no mistakes, only new parts. Have fun with this. I honestly hope that doing all of that will be super accessible to you, whatever level you're at, because we're not having to be, we're not having to read notation. We're not having to be like, okay, let's learn that. There's nothing to learn there. Mathematically speaking, notation speaking, we're not learning anything. It's more of just getting in the habit of doing some things with our hands and then hearing the melodies, which is a really fun musical process and creative process. So I hope that that alone gives you a lot of fun stuff to work on. But I want to give you a bonus here, sort of a more structured approach. Like, yes, that was step by step, that was somewhat structured, but something even more structured. Some of you might appreciate this. I want you to practice all of this. I want you to do it both ways. But there's another exercise that's helped a whole bunch of my students, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about last week with the shifting kick for building kick drum coordination. The whole thing of going. Shifting those kick doubles. So we can do that same kind of thing with our accents, with our singles. For instance, we could start off accenting the beats, then the E's, then the ands, and the Us. So we could go. And so we could do pairs like that, where we're doing 1E, 1E, or 1E, 2E, 3E, and then 1 E and, E and. And so that can be a really cool way to do this. So getting a little more specific with this has helped out my students a lot because it's something that's just very structured and step-by-step and right or wrong, and it helps you with the technical facility of moving around the drum set and just getting to the toms. And so if you're having technical issues with that first part, the 5 steps we covered, this might be where you need to actually start and practice being intentional with this and going to the floor tom on the beats, rack tom on the E's and the U's, or you could also go to the rack tom with the right hand, remember? You can do that however you want to and just practice getting that facility around the kit, then go back to the initial 5 steps of being more creative, less rules, a little less structure, and just seeing what kind of melodies you can come up with. But let me play through this again for you nice and slow. Basically, the step 1 here in this, this bonus approach is just go through the different accents here on the snare. Always accent beat 1, just so your ear can keep track of where the beat is. I'm going to play quarter notes on my hi-hat here, just to be the metronome for us so you can keep track of the beats. But it would basically look like this if we cycled through the different ways, the different places on the beat we can accent. So you could do like that. Let's say there's no timekeeping here to help us out. We want to anchor where we're at. We could go. So we could choose to always accent beat 1 if we want to, or if you've got your metronome going, you might not need to do that. So that's up to you, an optional, different ways to do it. But then step 2 for this, just move the accents to the toms and go. And then as just an additional extra step, you could do the 1E, 2E. Just like that, and then combine, those skills with the first things we were doing, like and when you start changing up the orchestration, the sky is the limit with what you can do. One final little bonus thing you can do for those of you more intermediate drummers getting into this. This is really cool. So a lot of times in tom grooves, especially if you're playing in church, if you're playing a lot of modern worship stuff. I've been a church drummer for 16 years now. A lot of years playing a lot of Sundays and playing a lot of church services. And something that has really become a big thing in mainstream worship music is the tom groove, and its various variations. But in a nutshell, what that is a dotted 8th note tom rhythm over quarter notes on the kick. It's actually a polyrhythm, but without getting into all the nerdy details of it, we're basically going 1 E and a 2 E and a E and a 4. So what you can do here as a bonus step with this whole accent thing is play that as your accent pattern. And so that can be great practice too. Then you can shift it over and say like, okay, let's do that same pattern, but let's start it on the E instead of the 1. So that would mean going up there to start it. Here's how that would go. I'll count us off so you can kind of feel where the E goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or we could shift it one more. We could start on the ands and go like this. I'm adding in those accents because it just felt right, hitting an accent on the end of 4. Let's remove those to keep it simple. Basically, that end of 4 does happen on the floor tom if we keep that same pattern. I was just adding it on the snare because it felt right. So you can do that, and you can play around with, hey, let's move a hand, let's play an accent on the snare instead of a tom. No rules, just a simple framework for you. So practice playing through those. Watch me play along. I'll link the additional lesson below where we go into more detail about the shifting exercise as well as some tom stuff, just so you've got even more instruction, more detail on that in case that's an area that you're focusing on right now. But my hope through all of this is that you're able to now begin thinking in rhythms. You're letting songs play in your head, grooves, fills play in your head, ideas play in your head, your tabletop drumming, your drum talking, your beatboxing. You know, you're going about your day doing your dishes, going. It sounds stupid, but that's a part of learning to improvise, being able to think in rhythms. Improvisation starts up here. It does not start here. It starts up here, but we can use physical actions on the kit to help our brain learn how to improvise. But really the true development of the improvisation happens at the kitchen table, on the steering wheel, beatboxing, you know, tapping, thinking through rhythms, letting songs play in our head. That's a huge part of it. And so be doing that. But hopefully you can start practically executing a lot of this stuff on the drum set now, and be able to start orchestrating stuff, because as you start to orchestrate the rhythms you come up with, it gets really fun because there's so much you can do. And so as you're able to think in rhythms and just play those independent rhythms, it means that when we get to a fill, you can come up with something different every time, and it's totally random and cool because even though, yeah, ultimately there is a finite number of rhythms, it's not unlimited. There is a number of rhythms that can be played in a given amount of time. But when you start orchestrating it, when you start changing dynamics, adding in ghost notes and going, there's just so many different ways you can play stuff and different ways you can open the hats. And so when you start getting into that and really getting to know your instrument and what sounds are at your disposal, that's where the improvisation really does become unlimited, and you're never regurgitating, you're always creating. And so I hope that you're able to feel free, feel creative, and just not boring anymore, because now your ideas are yours. You're not just regurgitating stuff. Yes, we want to be able to regurgitate simple things like sometimes that's the fill we need. Sometimes we need to play. Sometimes we need to also play. Certain simple fills are going to happen over and over again, and you should never feel like you're regurgitating or being boring by doing those. Sometimes that's what the song needs. But there are plenty of other times. And the more time you spend on your instrument, the more you work on this stuff, and the more you build your coordination, the more is at your disposal and the more you can do, which is pretty awesome. So have a lot of fun with this. My question for you as you go, what do you think is your bigger limitation on the drums? The hearing and thinking of ideas, or the physically executing them and orchestrating them on the kit? The reason I ask you that is because I want you thinking, if your biggest issue is the hearing and thinking of ideas, and then once you think of them, you can play them no problem, that means everything we talked about today, learning to improvise, that needs to be your area of focus, which is purely a mental thing. But if you're a total beginner, you haven't worked on coordination a lot, and you might be like, Steven, I came from a guitar, bass background, I got all sorts of rhythms in my head. That's awesome. But you might be like, it's just a mess when I try to apply it. That probably just means you lack coordination. You've got to build the coordination as the technical skill, the prerequisite to being able to then flawlessly play all those ideas that are already there. Or maybe it's a little bit of a mix of both, you know? Maybe we need to get better at improvising and better at the execution, the coordination. So I want you thinking about that, just food for thought, so that you know where your focus needs to be in your practicing. All right, I hope this has been fun for you today. This lesson's been a lot of fun for me. I love this kind of stuff because it's creative, it's making music, it's becoming more one with our instruments, which is what we want. Hopefully this is why you got in the drums in the first place, because you wanted to not just regurgitate stuff, not just learn songs note for note, but be able to make stuff your own, to be able to create your own ideas. That's where true fulfillment, purpose, and satisfaction comes in with the drums, I believe. And it's way more fun when you can create and you're not just tied to a predetermined set of notes. So hopefully this helps free you up, help you become the creative player you were made to be, because you are creative. And that creativity, sometimes you just gotta work at it. You gotta tap into it. But you can absolutely do this. Just stick with this, practice this stuff every day, and I promise you're gonna grow like crazy. So I'll see you on the next lesson. Stay non-glamorous. You can do this.